Our second speaker is Robert Bauer. He is the Chief Global Economist for Principal Global Investors. He establishes and directs global economic policy and strategy, oversees and conducts macroeconomic research, forecasts economic trends, anticipates market movements, and advises the investment staff on its investment decisions, which sounds like a full day's work right there. But he also provides a newsletter and commentary to principal employees and investors. He received his PhD in economics and a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Iowa State University. Studied finance and economics at the University of Minnesota. He joined the principal in 1995 after 3 years as an adjunct professor of finance and economics at Drake and Grandview. And in addition to all that academic qualification, he also has a great way to stay connected with ordinary economic concerns that Iowans face. He's still involved in operating the family farm in Van Meter. Please welcome Robert Bauer.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure for me to be here with you tonight. I'm very pleased to be able to share with you some thoughts about the economic and investment environment. How are we doing on noise here? Is there anybody in the back that wants to hear me that can't? Okay, seeing no hands, I will probably okay. You know, I've been doing this for a fair amount of time now, as Jim mentioned. Thank you very much for that nice introduction, Jim. You know, one of the things I've learned over the years, there are three kinds of economists. There are those who can count and those who can't. Most of us, you know, like to think we're pretty good with numbers. In fact, that's the definition of an economic student, is somebody knows 112 phone numbers but can't get a date. I tried to get a date with a very pretty young lady when I was an economics student years ago in college. I asked her for her phone number. She gave me an estimate. You know, a fellow died and went down below as punishment for his sins. The devil was showing him around the place all the different punishments that were available. Walked by a little room. Inside the room was an economist, a guy I'd known really well back up on Earth. And the economist was having a drink with a gorgeous young lady. I got mad. He said, "What's going on? I got to burn down here for all eternity. That guy's having a drink with a beautiful woman." Devil says, "Who are you to determine what kind of punishment that young woman gets?" Well, I'll try to not have the next 25 minutes or so be quite so punishing, ladies and gentlemen. You know, not long ago, I was in Barnes & Noble at a bookstore, and there was a book title right out front. You know, they have a stand where they want you to look at the books. And there was a title there that really caught me, and the title was "When China Rules the World." Subtitle, "The End of the Western World and the Birth of a New Global Order." Well, there was another one right next to us called "Crossing the Rubicon, the Decline of the American Empire at the End of the Age of Oil." Well, I thought, my goodness, is this what they're selling? So I looked around a little more, and they kept coming. U.S., the decline and fall. U.S., the rise and fall. The dollar meltdown. The ultimate depression survival guide. The coming economic crisis. And then articles in the same vein written by respected people. Neil Ferguson, a respected historian from Harvard, wrote an article called "An Empire at Risk." McKinsey Consultants Toward a Post-Dollar World. Paul Volcker, Paul Krugman, Nouriel Roubini have written things like this too. I put the words "U.S. in decline" into Google and got 52,900,000 hits. You know, it feels like a Rodney Dangerfield economy, right? You know, guys we don't get no respect. You know, I looked up the family tree the other day and found out I was the sap. You know, I got lost once. I asked a policeman for some help. I said, "You think we'll ever find my parents?" "I don't know, kid. There are lots of places they can hide." I called up my girlfriend. She said, "Come on over. There's nobody home." So I went over. There was nobody home. Well, their polls show similar kinds of things. You know, there's an ABC Washington Post poll that said 61% of American people think that the U.S. is in long-term decline. There was a Pew Research poll about a year ago that said 44% of U.S. people think China is the leading economic power. Only 27% thought the U.S. was the economic power. And you know, there are a lot of problems out there, and sometimes they seem insurmountable. You know, it seems like we have a terrorist almost in every airport, and then there's the trillion-dollar deficits as far as the eye can see, not only here in Iowa, as our auditor was saying, but across the country, huge deficits. People concerned about a global dollar meltdown. China's growing so fast, you know, they say it'll be bigger than the U.S. by a week from Thursday. And then capitalism, you know, we're told is really the problem with some of our economy today. And, manufacturing is dead. How can we go anywhere? Because we don't make anything anymore. Well, you know, I don't know about you, but I don't buy this stuff. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal just a few days ago said America's not dead, it's just dead in the water. So what I'd like to do today is talk about maybe taking stock of America. And in two ways. I'd like to first take stock of our economy and see where we are kind of at the present time, and then take stock of where we're going and look at what we believe is our economic future. But then take a little longer term look and take stock of our country as maybe as a society and where we came from and where we might be going as a country. And I hope to then dispel some myths that we see in the paper. Number one, that capitalism is the cause of our problems. Number two, that we are no longer a leading economic power. And number three, that manufacturing in the U.S. is just dead because, you know, we just don't make anything anymore. Well, let's start with the economy and kind of take stock where we are today. Well, you know, we certainly have been through very difficult economic times, as we all know. Even in early 2007, long before the recession started, there were huge headwinds for consumers. Gasoline prices were already $3.25, $3 a gallon, something like that. Interest rates were going up, house prices were coming down, and the headwinds just kept getting worse. And we entered a real recession in December of 2007, and for a while it seemed like, you know, kind of an ordinary, usual, mild type recession. But then we had those bankruptcies, you know, in September of 2008, the Lehman bankruptcy put Fannie and Freddie into essentially a receivership, and we had all these other financial institutions go under or almost go under, and that precipitated a huge financial crisis and came with it a global seizure of global credit markets. And it was that credit crunch that then transmitted this financial crisis to the real economy. And it was really an unprecedented kind of disaster. You know, my wife went to buy a toaster at Target, I think it was. Somebody offered her a bank. So business, you know, sales were falling substantially, and businesses couldn't get credit for ordinary expenses except at very exorbitant interest rates. So business didn't know what to do, so they just assumed that the worst was going to happen. So they laid off anybody that could walk. They cut production down to next to nothing. They cut capital spending practically to zero, and inventories then collapsed at the fastest rate that we've ever seen them collapse. And by the end of the third quarter in 2009, just last year, the inventory to sales ratio economy-wide was the lowest that it had ever been since the government had been keeping records. Now, because the recession was so bad, around the world, not just in the U.S., central banks sprang into action with massive, aggressive stimulus. Cut interest rates down to zero, trillions of dollars in liquidity and loans were given to financial institutions, and at the same time, money was essentially created out of thin air. But it was all of these actions of the central banks, not the fiscal stimulus, but it was the central bank action and easy monetary policy that brought some confidence back to the financial markets. So where are we today in the United States? Well, we do think we are in the midst of a moderate type recovery. And we think this recovery, we believe it because it's based on 5 kinds of underpinnings. One is there is an inventory cycle that really got started last quarter. You know, I mentioned businesses cut production way down here. Well, sales did fall, but they stabilized kind of here. But production was way down here. We were liquidating inventories. So last quarter, businesses raised production economy-wide at least up or almost up to match sales. But that's not enough, because let me tell you, Old Mother Hubbard's cupboard is bare. They're going to have to raise production well above sales to restock some of these lean inventory. Did you notice the inventory? There were not not many sales, big, huge sales after Christmas because the inventories were so lean going into it. The second underpinning is that profits economy-wide for business are absolutely outstanding. They're growing anyway at a fantastic rate. Third quarter grew at 50% annual rate. We expect the same in the fourth quarter. We think 2010